A fighter trains for a specific purpose, and their motivation is external. There's a date, there's an opponent, and there's a goal. Their training is intense, it's focused, and goal-oriented. But once the fight is over, then that drive might fade, and the urgency disappears. Their mindset is very results-based, and while there's nothing wrong with that, it definitely has its limits. And when you're always chasing that external event, then you're only really as disciplined as your next deadline. And this is how many of us live our lives, training, working, striving, but only when we have to. And now contrast that with the martial artist. The martial artist trains not for a win, but for growth. Not for the next battle, but for the long game. I don't train for a fight, I train for myself, and I'm training all the time. Training should be a way of life, and there's no off-season. There's no after the fight. You're always sharpening your skills, refining your mind, and developing discipline. And the goal? Well, the goal is perfection, but you know you'll never reach it. And that's the heart of the martial arts mindset. You're chasing a goal that you know you'll never reach. And it's not because it's frustrating, it's actually because it's inspiring. So why does this mindset matter, not just in martial arts training, but throughout life itself? So I want to explore today a little bit about how powerful those words are and how they can really reshape the way we focus upon self-growth and discipline. So at first glance, this might sound like a very simple mindset, but the more we unpack it, it holds really deep lessons with regards to things like identity, motivation, and essentially the path to mastery, not just in martial arts, but in any discipline. So when I read that quote by GSP, it really spoke to me because I cannot tell you the number of times that people come up to me when I'm training or comment on my videos and stuff like that, like, oh, do you compete and stuff? Or, you know, like, what's your fight record and all of that sort of stuff. And, you know, people ask this from different places. Some people are just curious, which is absolutely fine. But others, you see it kind of like, there's almost this undercurrent of judgment about what you're doing, and it's like they completely disregard how skilled you are or the knowledge you have in something under the assumption that unless you're actually competing, that it's all nonsense, which I find very baffling and really bizarre. And this is a thing that exists really strongly in martial arts especially, because you don't get somebody going up to every person working out in a gym lifting weights and saying to them like, well, what's the point in lifting weights if you're not, you know, going to enter a bodybuilding show? And when I say it like that, I think you can agree that it seems absolutely ridiculous. But for some reason in martial arts, there's this weird assumption that unless you're competing and you're a combat athlete, a fighter, that you're not taking it seriously. So when people say these kind of things, they're usually under the assumption that their statement is from a place of like high knowledge and wisdom. But really, when you've been in the game a long time and you've, you know, got a lot of training experience, when you hear things like that, it immediately tells you so much about the person that they don't even realize about themselves, because to even believe that that is like the ultimate goal of training martial arts just shows that they don't even understand the most basic components of being a martial artist themselves. They just see it as this like external validation, this externally motivated thing. And fighting is just one element of martial arts. You know, even somebody like GSP, who's obviously gone through that path himself, he's even said in interviews that he only really did the fighting for money and for like girls and stuff like that, because he's a true martial artist and he was intrinsically motivated to train for himself because he had a love for the thing he was doing. And this is like always been in my own motivation as well. And I think people find it difficult to understand, maybe when they see somebody putting so much work into something and training so hard, they struggle to understand how that person will be able to kind of bring that out of them without having that external focus. But my personal opinion is that when you are training for that external goal, you know, that date, like we said in the intro, especially as you get up higher levels in the game, you are surrounded by more and more people to kind of support you in a way. You know, and professional fighters have like the top level nutritionists, conditioning experts and stuff like that working with them, right? So when you don't have any of that stuff and you're just doing it for yourself, surely that shows a higher degree of self-efficacy and motivation, because you haven't got these people to, you know, like keep you accountable and keep pulling you along when it gets tough, and it's all coming from within. And again, going back to those people that kind of look down on you if you're not competing, it really does show the level of a lack of knowledge and a very sort of like ego structure that they're speaking from. Because when you do speak to these people that have gone through that, like I said, you know, some of my best friends are professional fighters and stuff like that. Because they've gone through that gauntlet and they've kind of reached a really high level, they haven't got anything to prove anymore, and that reveals a much deeper understanding of the martial art and people's motivations in general. And in my experience, those people all get it, right? It's the ones that aren't really very experienced or they feel like they've got something to prove that always come out with those type of statements. So, like I said before, something that someone says from an assumption that they're being like clever and stuff, it really reveals a lot about their character that they're unaware of themselves. What's up guys, I'm sorry for interrupting the video, but I just need to tell you something, which is that I only take on 10 new coaching clients per month, that's it. Why? Because what I teach is way more than martial arts. It's how you do one thing, it's how you do everything. The discipline you build in training, that's the same discipline that transforms your business, your relationships, and your entire life. But real transformation requires focused attention, and you simply cannot achieve that in a group with 500 other people. Right now, I've got some spots open for this month, but they always fill up really fast, and then people end up messaging me asking when the next opening is. So don't be that person waiting on the sidelines. And if you're watching this thinking, I'd like results like this in every area of my life as well, then the link is below this video where you can book a discovery call. But only click if you're absolutely serious. I work with people who are ready to commit and transform everything. The link is right there, so go and book your call now. One of my close friends who was an amateur boxer, who's actually the boxing coach you've probably seen in some of my clips before, and he said to me that he was really inspired by what I was able to do, because for him, just like I've been speaking about in this video, he said that he always felt like he had to have a fight or something to do to kind of get him up and get him out in the gym. And when he'd retired, he was really struggling to find that motivation. And this didn't happen to him, of course, but how many professional fighters have we seen that once they don't have the spotlight anymore, you know, and all of the kind of adoration and the goal to aim for, how many of them just fall off and go into things like addictions? They become really overweight and stuff. They don't really know what to do anymore. And it all looks nice when they're on the climb, you know, and everyone likes them and stuff like that. But inevitably they're going to fall, because nothing can last forever. You know, this is pretty much a young man's game, combat sports. And when those lights fade and, you know, they're not the superstar fighter anymore, they don't really know where to go. But really it was like they kind of had the wrong mindset from the start. So this is a complete paradigm shift, and people need to see it in a different light. You know, like it's not what it looks like on the surface. You need to find your own motivation and your own intrinsic motivation that comes from within. That's what I would call authentic motivation. And that's about you and you alone. And as cliched as it sounds, it's been said thousands of times before, it's the journey and who it makes you, who you become in the process, not the destination. And if you're always aiming at the destination, even if you get there, you won't be fulfilled and happy. You need to be doing it for you, and it needs to come from within. And then what that does for you as well is proves to yourself, undeniably, that you've got self-efficacy, that you can apply yourself to something and you can see it through to the end, and you don't need that external motivation to get you out of bed, basically. Obviously, it's slightly nuanced in the fact that we need goals to aim for, but if the goal is the sole reason that you're doing it, I would say that that's the wrong approach, and you need to balance that with an intrinsic motivation and a love of the process for doing it. Because how many people have we seen, say in business for instance, that make all of this money, all of these millions, but they're just completely miserable because they just had that goal in mind and didn't really take the time to actually ask basic questions like, is this something that feels aligned to me and feels authentic? And they just go straight for that thing. And then they just end up miserable. So it's evident that these achievements aren't going to provide you fulfillment and happiness. You know, like people can still be miserable with absolutely millions or even billions in the bank. So I would say, don't make that mistake of like climbing a ladder that's put up against the wrong wall, because when you reach the top, you're just gonna have to climb back down again and start afresh. And that's what made somebody like GSP such a special athlete, is because he wasn't ever just preparing for fights. He was training to improve himself all the time and was obsessed with learning new things, and he dabbled in loads of other disciplines like gymnastics, even things like philosophy and stuff, if you look into the things he was interested in. And now, even after he's retired, he's still training, he's still in absolutely amazing shape, because it was never about the win for him. It was about the love of the process. He's still always evolving, and he never viewed the martial arts as something that you graduate from or a tool that you use to attain some other end. And he sees it as like a lifelong path, which is exactly what it is. And that's really why he's, somebody that's more than a champion and is such an inspiration to so many people today. And if you look at sort of anyone in different endeavors throughout history that really stands out, I don't mean somebody that was just kind of successful in a sport or an endeavor. I mean like a true legend, somebody like Michael Jordan, Bruce Lee, Michael Jackson. These were all people that had such an intrinsic love for what they were doing that it basically transcended any achievements that they managed to get themselves. And I think there's so many lessons that we can take from that to apply to our own process. So I'll leave you with this, guys. Are you training like a fighter and you only show up when there's something to win? Or are you living like a martial artist, somebody that's committed to lifelong growth and improving themselves? And the next time you're working towards something, whether it's, a business goal, a sporting endeavor, a physical achievement, let's try and remember those words from GSP. I train for myself. My goal is perfection, but I will never reach perfection. And you don't have to be in the ring to live like a martial artist. You just need to show up every single day and do the work.